On the west coast of Canada, on Vancouver Island, British Columbia, there's a man who's devoting his life to the preservation of the wolf. Trying to beat all the odds, this extraordinary man has been advocating and educating people on the importance of the wolf in our ecosystem. He is collaborating with Jane Goodall in her program called Roots and Shoots. He has made a very public stance on how the wolf is persecuted across BC. In my recent conversations with him at his acreage in Nanaimo, Gary told me all about the wolves in a way that he only can. Our conversation was so good, so wide-ranging, that it left me with a total new appreciation for the wolf. Gary Allan is the Wolfman who speaks for the wolves. First, I want to talk about, when did your love for wolves start?
Probably when I was a young child and, loved animals and, started to read a bit about wolves. Then into, in high school, we read Farley Moat's book, Never Cry Wolf, and that helped to strengthen it. And then, I got, in 2003, I think it was, my first wolf dog, and so the last 14 years I've been very intimately involved with wolf behavior. So yeah.
Okay. And what type of wolves do you have?
Well, I have a very high content wolf dog. So the wolf in them would be the gray wolf, which is the species in North America. Mm-hmm. It's not the color. The biologists call it the gray wolf or Canis lupus. And there's about 5 subspecies of them in North America. So, for example, Nahani, the one in the back, is an Arctic. He's all white. So he's still considered a gray wolf, so that dispels the color part of it. And then you got the Mexican wolf and the eastern timber wolf, and then Canis lupus, occidentalis, and nubilis. Those are the other 2 really large subspecies that cover most of Western Canada.
And how many wolves are on Vancouver Island?
About 350 is the estimate by Fish and Wildlife, plus or minus 50 on either side. The bulk of them, Brad, are north of Campbell River. About 70% of them are north of Campbell River and then down the west coast of Vancouver Island from Cape Scott down to Ucluelet. So they tend to populate areas where humans don't populate. Right. So on the eastern side of the island here, very few wolves. There'd be some back in and behind like Nanaimo lakes, and there's some in and behind Lake Cowichan and that, but they're not going to frequent territory where there's a large human population.
Right. And yeah. How are the wolves different on Vancouver Island compared to on the mainland and in interior? Okay.
Well, there used to be prior to 1994, there used to be a Vancouver Island wolf. It was a subspecies, and it was called Canis lupus crassidon. That got amalgamated into the nubilis subspecies. The ones on Vancouver Island tend to be smaller than the interior ones because the prey here is not as big. For example, the deer are not as big here. There's getting to be a decent population of elk on Vancouver Island, so that may have some impact upon the wolves. But the ones in the interior, definitely, they're hunting elk and deer and moose and that much bigger prey. Some of the ones on Vancouver Island on the outer coast, the west coast, would have to some degree a marine diet. For example, the ones in the Pacific Rim Park, where Park Canada did analysis of about 300 wolf scat, the deer ranked 4th in terms of their preference of food, and the river otter was number 1. There wasn't a lot of difference between the 2, but the deer should have been up like around 80%, where it was down around 20%. So they do, as you can see, they do have a bit more of a marine-based diet here on Vancouver Island, particularly the ones on the coast. Yeah.
Can you tell me a little bit about the wolf pack? What is as far as the social structure of their hierarchy?
Okay. Yeah, the wolf pack, or is what some more of the leading wolf biologists are referring to it as a family group, but same organization. Typically 5 to 14 members in a wolf pack, and it fluctuates as pups are born into the pack and wolves, the older wolves, disperse and go to find their own pack. So there's going to be, in that kind of population size of 5 to 14, there's going to be one breeding pair. So there's going to be one breeding female and one breeding male. They will breed for life and mate for life, so the constellation of the pack and that the pups should be their pups. So maybe some pups born 4 years ago are the 4-year-olds, right? And 3 years ago the 3-year-olds, and last year would be the yearlings. So where you don't have exploited packs, and by exploited I mean hunting and trapping of them, they will stay together, and then somewhere around 2 years, if some of the wolves, whether male or female, want to go and seek out and form their own pack, that's generally because of competition for food or competition for breeding. They will leave their natal pack, the pack they're born into, and go out and seek their own. But when those ones leave, the pups of that year replace them. So the numbers fluctuate. But the real important social relationships is that breeding pair is the nucleus of the pack, and it's what gives it its strength. They're going to teach the pups, how to hunt and how to be a wolf, and so that's very important to leave them intact. So, if unfortunately, they were, let's say, hunted or trapped or hit by a car or something like that, then you can see the huge vacuum that would be created in terms of their apprenticeship or their sharing of their knowledge to the pups.
Right. And what is the hierarchy as far as when they're feeding? When they have a kill, is it the alpha male and the omega female that feed first, and then works its way down through the pack?
Yeah. Yeah, there's certainly what they're going to go for is they want to rip open the body cavity.
Right.
So they want to get to the internal organs, the heart and the pancreas, the liver, the lungs, and that's where really all the very important nutrients are. So they're going to certainly the breeding pair are going to want to consume that. They'll consume about 7 pounds a day. Not that they eat every day,
right.
But they need that to be able to successfully breed, the research shows. The other one's about 4 pounds a day. So you can see that there's a disparity there in terms of the volume, but it's also the quality. But they'll, if you bring down a big elk at 600 pounds, I mean, there's
right.
certainly enough
to go around.
Yes, and that. So the pups and the yearlings tend to get preferential treatment. The pups are where they go when they regurgitate the food to them.
They feed them. They're a high priority.
Yes, and that. Yeah. So the 2 and 3 year olds they have less priority to the food. So that's where the competition for food comes in, and that's why they may disperse from the pack. Yeah.
Interesting. There was a photo that was circulated around Facebook, you probably saw it, where there was a pack of wolves going across this snowy terrain.
Right.
And they were saying that they put the older, weaker members at the start of the pack,
right,
with the alpha at the back. Does that make sense, or do you think they would have the stronger ones at the front to go through the I guess it depends what they're really doing at that particular time,
if they're plowing through some snow, it's just snowed in that, you're likely to have the stronger ones at the front to sort of break through the snow. Wolves have narrow chests. They don't want big chests because if they're breaking through the snow, it's easier to travel with a narrow chest. So you probably have the stronger ones there. I think in that photo that I saw, there was already, the snow, there wasn't fresh snow. The trail was sort of already determined, and they were traveling through that. So they would have the older.
The alpha would be at the back then?
Yeah, in that photo. But again, you don't want to read a lot of similarity into that, because you could have a different pack with where they have a different
strategy as far as what they're doing, right?
But you know, I think the one thing that you can say about them is that they really take care of themselves. I mean, this is the people don't understand about wolves.
Right.
Wolves are incredibly sentient. They have an incredible sense of family. So they look after their pups, and you know, all the wolves, not just the ones that are the breeding pair, but you know, the aunts and uncles, so to speak, or the cousins or whatever, you know, if we put it in human terms, and then they'll look after the older ones as well. And there's a great photo of wolves on the Central Coast. It's in Ian McAllister's book, The Last Wild Wolves, and there's a wolf there called Three Legs, and it's a female. And it appears that a deer has kicked her in, I believe it's the rear right leg, and it's permanently broken. So she stands on three legs, and her role is to look after the pups and to you know, be that kind of nurturing role, and you know, so she'd be able to eat salmon and be able to catch that herself, but she's not going to be able to chase down deer and that with three legs and that, but they help feed her. So you can see this real you know, interest in helping each other out, and that's very much true in wolf packs, and you know, people don't understand that.
One thing I noticed when I was in the pen with the wolves is that they seem to be on the move all the time, and they seem to be eyeing you up, sizing up. Is that kind of a strategy that they use when they're hunting? Are they, you know, that they're looking where the opportunities are, they're sizing you up how weak you are, maybe, you know, where they might get into trouble as far as their prey?
Yeah, in terms of, you know, with me being out there, they're, you know, they're, and you were there, so so they knew that there was somebody new, so they were very, you know, very cautious, which is what wolves are. They're constantly aware of what's in their environment and that. So when they're hunting, you know, again, you know, we talk about cognitive mapping, which the wolves will do. So, you know, they're very active in their territory, particularly in the winter. Not so much in the summer when they're raising their pups, but in the winter when they're moving. So they're going to know where the prey is. And so, for example, you know, if they come upon an elk herd, because they hunt elk differently than they hunt deer, because deer tend not to be in herds, elk do. So they're going to be you know, running through that elk herd, and they're constantly going to be assessing all those elk, and they have Brad, they have the sixth sense as to which one is the prey that they want to select, and it's going to be, you know, factors of, you know, it's an old, you know, they can tell it's old, it's maybe got a limp that we don't see, it's slower than the others, you know, it's maybe it's a young one that they're going to try to get. They're not going to take on a very robust male or female elk. That's just too dangerous. And that, so they have that ability, so they're constantly assessing it. That's the risk assessment. And then when they've locked on to the one that they want, then they target that. And
so what do they try to separate it from the herd to start with?
Yeah, they'll get them running. That's what they want to do, is they want to get the herd running.
They use that finesse
and then they can assess it easier than if they just stand there. So for example, moose will just stand there because they're so big, and and they'll just, you know, there could be a pack of 6, and if it's a big strong moose, it'll hold off those 6 wolves. But so they're not going to challenge a really big strong moose. They're going to challenge one that's weaker than that. But in terms of the ones in the elk, they want to get them moving, and that, and then they can assess it.
That's interesting.
Yeah.